Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How Cloud Computing is Transforming the Workplace. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Veeam. We've got a special guest lined up for today's event with a really exciting keynote presentation. So thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun, but we want this to also be educational. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll serve as your moderator on today's webinar. On the left-hand side of your audience console, you'll find the Questions tab, and it's there that you can enter your questions for our dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We also have a number of handouts available for download in the Handouts tab, and I encourage you to check those out. Finally, at the end of today's webinar, we'll be announcing the winner of our 3 Oculus Quest 2 VR systems. These are totally awesome, cutting-edge virtual reality technology, and I must admit I'm a little jealous myself of anyone who wins one of these. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. And without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenters. They are Mr. Danny Allen, Chief Technology Officer at Veeam, and our special guest today is Mr. Tom Wujek, international keynote speaker, technology pioneer, and design thinker. I'm so excited to have Tom on the event today. He's got a fantastic presentation lined up for you on how cloud computing is transforming the workplace. And with that, take it away, Tom.
Hi, everyone. This is Tom. So the cloud, right? Here we are communicating over the cloud. We just were talking about 2020. Now we're living in this amazing, turbulent time, aren't we? Where the world is transforming, but we're also living in a time that is truly magical, a time where emerging technologies are transforming the way we think, transforming the way in which we work, and transforming the way in which we collaborate. And we're truly come to a point where if we can imagine something, we can most likely do it, given the emerging technologies that we have. It's changed the way that we meet. Technology has changed the way in which we interact with computers. It's changed the world of construction. It's transformed how we get health insurance and even the way in which we get healthcare. It gives us the promise for self-driving vehicles. And if you read the current business publications, the promise of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence has the potential of completely reinventing the way in which we create and capture value. And all of this is empowered by the cloud, this amazing collection of technology that is essentially making every industry computable. Now, here's an interesting illustration that shows the amount of data that has been stored in the cloud. And notice that this is an exponential curve. And just over the last few years, we've now grown to 40 zettabytes. I had to look up what a zettabyte is, but it's one with a whole lot of zeros, 26 zeros, in fact. There is now in the world 5,200 terabytes of information for every individual on our planet. That's really pretty astounding. But we're at the early stages, but according to recent research, in the year 2025, just 5 years from now, there will be not 40, but 175 zettabytes of information. And we already are pretty familiar with this. Every individual has, or the average individual has, about 36 cloud services. I think I've got over 50 myself that we're using on a regular basis, whether it's Google Maps or Gmail or one of the many other apps that we use. It's part of this large economy that is continuing to grow to well over $600 billion. That's just extraordinary. It's just under 2/3 of $1 trillion. This is an important number to know. 7%. What does that refer to? And that refers to the businesses who feel good about the visibility that they have over their IT business. So think about that for a second. 7% feel good. 93% feel not so good about it. So that gives us pause to think about what's the impact, what's the future, and how do we make our web and cloud connections much more impactful. What I'd like to talk about over the next 30 or 35 minutes today is how we move from one quadrant of success to another, moving from reactive to proactive and moving from tactical to strategic. And organizations and individuals that are living in the lower left quadrant, not so good. You're being buffeted by the rapid changes. And what I'd like to share with you are methods by which we can move to the upper right. And what I'd like to do specifically is explore industries that you may not be familiar with and to share perhaps a broader range of thinking, to really expand our thinking about what types of strategies we can use to expand our capabilities. So we'll be looking primarily at two broad capabilities. One is the ability to be more agile, and secondly, the ability to be more innovative, to respond to the changing pressures and the changing market dynamics, as well as to look for and to create new value. There's primarily three lenses that we will look through, which I'll explain in a minute. Just by way of background, I'm not a cloud IT professional, but I've helped organizations over the last 25, almost 30 years go through three broad transformations. One is the use of emerging technologies. The second is to use those technologies to create new types of business value. And thirdly is to use methods including design thinking and lean and agile for better creative collaboration. As an emerging technologist, I've worked with organizations such as Alias and Autodesk and Singularity University, among others, to identify new and emerging technologies to help organizations truly transform their businesses. And this has led to the creation of better, more sustainable buildings, more effective, better vehicles, better cars, even better video games and more colorful movies. As a business consultant, I've had a chance to study the impact of these emerging technologies and how they have changed a variety of industries, from manufacturing to construction to filmmaking to video games to healthcare and other areas as well. And as a creative collaborator, I've had the opportunity to work with senior leaders of pretty large range of organizations to help them figure out what's next. And so that's really where I'm coming from and what I'd like to share with you today. So you'll see examples of some of these design thinking methodologies. So agility and innovation really boils down to our capacity to do three things really well. The first is to engage with our people, to help them transform their mindsets from a tactical to a strategic format. The second is to use better processes, going from linear stage gate processes to much more iterative. And thirdly, to take advantage of the emerging tools. And success depends on the intersection of these three. We can have the most effective tools, but if we have poor processes or if we have folks that are not really engaged in line, we really won't have the kind of business success that we're looking towards. So let's take a look at some of the emerging tools and explore how they are evolving and changing. And I think the reason we're here today is because of our capacity to design and build this one thing, which is a transistor. Now, here's an interesting fact. According to the American Microprocessors Association, this year we will produce more individual transistors on the planet than harvest individual grains of rice. So let that sink in for a second. We're producing more transistors than grains of rice, 32 trillion a second. And to help you visualize just how big of a number that is, here's 1 million grains of rice in a box. And to this, I would say, thank goodness for interns, because without which we wouldn't be able to visualize the important, just kidding. It's about 1 million grains of rice, a foot by a foot by a foot. A typical smartphone today has just over 11 billion transistors. The Apple iPhone 12 has 11,800,000, which or 11,800,000,000, which would cover about 110 feet by 110 feet. It's just an enormous number. In 1 second, the number of transistors produced on the planet will produce enough boxes to cover this portion of Manhattan, and in 1 minute, it would cover pretty much all of Manhattan. And of course, they're microscopic, so we don't actually see them, but they are growing at this exponential rate. things move slowly and suddenly. And as IT professionals, you know this better than others. But perhaps some of your business leaders don't know this. So it's important to let them know the impact of this transformation. So here's a photo from the year 2005, and it's of the ascension of the Pope. I'd like you to take a look in the Vatican to see if you can see any smartphones. So look around, see, can you find any smartphones here? Lower right, lower left. Well, in fact, you don't see any because the smartphone wasn't invented until the year 2006. Let's move forward to the year 2013. Do you see any more smartphones? Yeah, things move slowly and then suddenly. And if you go to, if you went to a concert, say last year, you'd see something like this, smartphones everywhere. And if you go to a concert today, you'd probably see something, again, like this. And it's all powered by this exponential growth of technology. Now, a good way to think about business transformation and technology transformation is the impact that technology has on our ability to understand the world. That's really kind of what it boils down to. And technology, among other things, allows us to produce better sensors, computers, and fabricators. And each forms a part of the business transformation equation. So sensors, for example, they used to be fairly large, the size of your thumb, and now they are exquisitely tiny. That on the right is a 5-megapixel camera. With emerging LiDAR technology, now a part of every modern Apple smartphone, soon probably just about every smartphone, will be able to produce ridiculous amounts of data. In this case, there are using LiDAR, being able to create accurate three-dimensional models of the world. Sensors are transforming industries. They are making industries computable, whether it's industrial or streetlights or healthcare or medical. We are now able to have an automatic on-ramp gathering information about the physical world. The implication for this is this. The age of guessing is now officially over. There's no excuse for not knowing information about the world. Where does that information, where does that data go? Well, it goes into the second class of devices, computers, that process the information. Now, the story used to be that there was more processing power in a single phone than all of NASA had in the year 1969. And now processing is, of course, becoming more and more powerful. Here's a 386 computer, a full capability with input, output in 2016. Then the same computational power in another chip, significantly smaller, and then in the year 2019, even smaller. That's a full 386 computer. And now modern research is putting computational power into biological components, literally into the DNA. So that's astonishing. But equally astonishing is the fact that computation is now being distributed through the cloud. Now, the cloud, I think, is really a terrible name for what this capability represents. Thomas Friedman says that this is a supernova. It is this incandescent engine that is illuminating and transforming industries. And so the computational power is allowing us to produce better models, better material simulations, and much, much more. The implication for better computation is that it abstracts complexity. We literally can, with a single button press, call an Uber and pull into action 1,000 different tasks. The third capability is fabrication, taking the computed information and then putting it back to the world. For example, in the world of robots, where instructions bring an assembly line to life and reduce the amount of time it takes to build a vehicle, a Tesla in this, by a dramatic amount. Or you could look here. This is looks like a computer graphic, but it's really not. They're robots that are packing groceries, doing 90,000 orders every day. So it's just astonishing behind the scenes, the capability that is connecting together. So the fabrication, the output devices are transforming industries because they allow us to perform surgeries, to move things around, to create autonomous vehicles, and much, much more. The lesson for us here is of infinite expressibility. Our capability to put the right information and the right material at the right place and the right time is the transformational capability. So This combination of sensors, computers, and fabricators has created a new workflow, which is the mechanism for the transformation of work. I call it capture, compute, create. And it's worth understanding and thinking about your own business and how each aspect of business can be augmented with these technologies. It's transforming products, processes, and creating new types of platforms. So let me show you a few examples of this and whet your appetite for where the world might be going, beginning with something as simple as shoes. So the old way of making shoes, it begins with a physical model of a foot that is an approximation of your foot. It takes anywhere from 12 to 15 months to create a physical model. Okay, so I won't go through the details of the old way, but think about how you might use capture, compute, create to create a perfect shoe that's just for you. Well, it would probably begin with a scan of your foot, a number of cell phone photographs using a technology called photogrammetry uploaded to the cloud, where that information goes to a computer program that then helps you select what job you want the shoe to do for you. So if you're a runner, you'll want support in a certain way. If you're a jumper, you'll want another. And that better information then goes into a 3D model of a shoe. So I held my first 3D printed shoe 16 years ago or so, kind of fell apart, but it's now come to quite a remarkable place. For example, Alison Felix, who's a world-class athlete, had a challenge, and her challenge was that as a runner moving along a curved path, the forces were disproportionate. She was actually getting injuries from this. So Nike used a specialized foot scanner, created a digital model of her foot, even created a 3D printout of the foot, figured out the tension curves or the stiffness curves of her feet, and created a custom shoe that was just right for her. The impact was pretty amazing because the computational capability discovered that one of her feet acted as an accelerant, and the other one acted as a steering wheel. So they didn't realize that before. The impact led to 2 gold medals, but the bigger transformation that we're seeing is the transformation of the footwear market, where you move from buying the physical objects to buying the intellectual property of the shoe that is made just for you because it's perfectly custom fit, to leasing the material flow because it's a full cradle-to-cradle model, and one which you subscribe to the fitness service. So all of that, of course, is enabled through the back-end computation. It's pretty remarkable the way in which shoes are evolving. In fact, just about every consumer product is evolving because computation is literally embedded within them, such as these shoes here that respond to the way in which you perform and then upload that information back to your personal cloud service. Let's look at another industry, mining. What if you took the running of large, complex mining operations and combined them with video games? So actually the largest mining company in the world, Rio Tinto, it now is using gaming technology and allowing their engineers and drivers to mine a mine that literally 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers away. And that's just astonishing. Improved productivity, lower cost, and transforming the industry. And that's great news for the company. Not so good news for the 200 truck drivers that have lost their jobs. So these are some examples of how the cloud is changing the nature of work, literally making mining a computable capability. Let's look at cars. A friend of mine has developed a car company that literally begins with a VR experience where you look at a 3-dimensional digital model of a vehicle in the privacy of your own garage, and then you tug and pull at the control points, and the computer generates a genetic model of the most efficient chassis. And then using 3D printing, it actually is printed out. So this is a viable business. And he said that the biggest innovation wasn't all that technology, it was the financing that allowed him to get many tens of millions of dollars of crowdfunding from people who want a stake in the business. Just extraordinary. Another example, law. You would think that the law, is that computable with the cloud? Well, one organization called Law Geeks literally allows you to perform a NDA, so putting a non-disclosure agreement through a device, which will then sharpen it up. In many ways, it's reducing the amount of time from 10 hours to about 45 minutes for an NDA. So not reducing work, but transforming work tremendously. But there are many other examples as well of the impact. I'm hoping you're seeing some of these beautiful animation. They look like a young K-pop stars. In fact, that's what they are, except they're not real. They're digitally simulated. And so literally an artist can select the attributes of the K-pop artists that they like, and then put them into a digital magazine for clothing and even animation. So every industry is being transformed as a result of capture, compute, create. I'm going to leave you with this one here, which I think is perhaps the most interesting, the most shocking, and that's the power of art. Art is perhaps some of the most truly unique and something that we consider to be the most human. But a research project from the Reich Museum and Microsoft was trying to apply machine learning to create a new Rembrandt. And so what the computational team did is they studied every single Rembrandt and made an analysis that captured the data of literally every aspect of every Rembrandt ever known. Position of the nose, the location of the eye, the shadows, the collars, and then went even further and it studied the depth map, how paint was literally deposited one layer at a time to make a Rembrandt a Rembrandt. They give it that artistly feel. And the computer, with some heavy-duty crunching, again distributed through the cloud, created a sense of Rembrandtness. The curators then did something that they've never done before, which is said, what if you could create a painting of a guy 30 to 40 wearing a hat collar looking to the right? What would that look like? So these are the input parameters, and here's the output. So think about that for a second. Imagine if you were given the task after looking at paintings of Rembrandts to figure out what to draw. What would you draw? Mine would look like a stick figure, not anything like this. So computation is transforming essentially every aspect of industry, from construction to healthcare and many, many others. So it's worth looking at what are the capabilities, what are the abilities that people have to make these transformations actually happen. What is it? What are the secret sauce? By the way, before I mention that, we talk about the transformations that are taking place. COVID, of course, is an accelerant, and so I did a bit of research to see what's the impact of COVID on the cloud. And the pre-COVID, 20% of organizations were having cloud transformation activities. Post-COVID, almost triple that. Number of people, professionals working from a distance, 3%. Post-COVID, 65%. Number of collaboration tools, this is from Microsoft, 20 million examples to now 75 million, over 3 times the amount. And then VPN users have grown from 17% to 94%. That seems a little suspect to me, but must have been research from a VPN user. So emerging technologies are literally producing these magical capabilities. And as an IT specialist, as an IT leader, as a CIO, it's important to pay attention to these emerging technologies and clarify where they can be used in the context of advancing the business. So the shift that we need to make as technology leaders is moving from the tactical reactive region to the proactive is to engage businesses by looking at emerging and new technologies. So that's an overview of some of the tools. Let's look to some other domains, such as the domain of processes. I guess if we summarize it in one statement, in one image, it's that we need to move from a linear to an iterative model, moving from a single long-term plan to a highly engaged iterative activity. Now, I'm going to share a wacky story with you, which will seem completely irrelevant, but in fact is at the heart of transformation and at the heart of effective team collaboration. And this is from a TED Talk I gave some years ago called the Marshmallow Challenge, where you need to build the tallest freestanding structure with 4 people. You've got just under 18 minutes to perform it using the following ingredients: 20 sticks of spaghetti, a meter or yard of tape, a meter of string, a marshmallow. The marshmallow's got to be on top. It's got to be freestanding, and so on. And what most people do is they go through a series of design stages where there's a time of orientation, of figuring out, okay, who does what. But what really happens in this wacky exercise is that people spend time seeking power and clarifying who it has the kind of the pecking order. Then there's a planning time, and then there's a building phase, and what turns into something called the ta-da moment, where someone gingerly takes the marshmallow, puts it on top, and the structure magically stands. But what usually happens is the weight of the structure causes the whole system to fall and collapse. So it turns out that some folks do much more poorly than others. That's recent grads of business school. And who does particularly well is kids, kindergartens. And the reason is that they work differently. They don't want to be, no kid wants to be CEO of Spaghetti Inc., but instead kids start playing with the marshmallow and they build more structures that fall down and cause the whole thing to, and they have more time to learn. They build more prototypes and they get more feedback along the way. And this is remarkable. It's really, the results are incredibly consistent. In fact, there's a whole bunch of reports that have emerged from this. By the way, when people work in complete silence, what do you think happens? In fact, they do much better than, and if they work on speed, it's interesting. Here's the speed record. This is unofficial, of a little girl who did it under 45 seconds. And the tallest structure, well, it turns out that architects and engineers are the tallest, produce the tallest structures. I had a CAD team come to me a couple of years ago, and we really want to figure out what's the largest potential structure. And so they actually built a CAD model and produced the tallest potential structure here. Actually, making sure there's no individual waste. And what they did is they built a structure that is an unfathomable 67.5 inches. Why do I tell you the story? Well, because to build the structure, people have to do something that they've never done before with people that they haven't worked with not enough resources and not enough time. Sound familiar? And so some of the lessons is that that building prototypes is a really critical factor. Types of prototyping is actually being used in a wide variety of industries, from the making of movies and essentially effective IT projects. One of the most complex IT projects now is virtual cinematography. And those of you who follow the work of Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and
While filming
Magic,
the scene from Disney's The Mandalorian, the actors could see their surroundings.
it's now possible to create real-time digital activity.
It's just LED screens
with
displaying
gaming
backgrounds
technology in the
pre-made
back.
in a video game engine. Compare that with
Just for sake of time, I'm going to scoot through that. You know, when you look at organizations that are really agile, that produce the greatest sort of innovations, there's something that's really common that appears, and that is something that looks like this. Design studios where ideas are made visible. And this speaks to a different process, moving from a model where we're just sharing documentation to a highly collaborative activity where people ask questions, where they show, and don't just talk, and they perform actions. They perform these time-bound activities where people work together in key formats. So I like to call these things plays. And a play is simply just a time-bound activity where you conduct a single action. Why am I telling you this? Because it turns out it's also at the heart of a technology transformation. Getting a clear question asked, making sure that people are involved in producing the answer, and ensuring that there's a clear discussion of the implication. And so there are many different kinds of plays. There are journey maps where you figure out the needs of your end consumer and walk them through from early stages to the end stages. And it's also true of, and of course we can now use a variety of online technologies to do that. In IT mapping, the clear a capability is to figure out where to create value, really understand where value is created, and ensuring that the right IT capabilities are built. You know, I like to think of thinking about business visually and seeing business from several focal settings. And as we move from tactical to more proactive, strategic, so moving from vision to principles to strategy to the technology that supports the goals. So I think the most successful business transformations occur when you have a single unified diagram that shows this entire picture, connecting the impact of technologies through that support processes, that support the business activities, the business model, that support the strategy all the way up. And so having the right types of plays is a key transformative factor. Organizations that don't do this are organizations that typically only look at one particular aspect of the transformation. And so what does that actually look like? So in the olden days, pre-COVID, it kind of looked like this. And some of these are from technology companies where you quite literally visualize work up on the wall. And now we, of course, can do this digitally with a set of new types of tools. That's process. And so people moving from a linear to iterative, thinking small and thinking big and acting small is a really key area. Now, I just want to share one example of the transformation to, and it's really about the mindset. So, and how one organization has moved from a essentially near bankrupt to a world leader in their manufacturing process. And it turns out it was through the adoption of lean methodologies. So here's the CEO of that particular company, US Synthetic. And they made small component parts called drill bits that go into very large drilling structures that drill into the Earth's core, seeking oil and gas and so on. And so I won't go through the details of it, but they, highly detailed, structured visualization of their business. And the shift was moving from process to a mindset of a certain set of values and principles. And so the CEO was most proud of one particular example. And I'm showing you the example here, and that was for the janitor. The janitor was trying to figure out how he could become more lean, how he could become more agile. And his method was, he realized that he had to fill up his bucket 30 to 40 times a day, and that took about a minute and a half. And he jury-rigged the top of a toilet so he could flush the top of the toilet and fill up his pail in less than 3 seconds. That saved him the better part of an hour every day. So the shift in people is to honor imagination, to work together more creatively and collaboratively, and to use the principles of lean and agile and design thinking to be able to become, to visualize their work together. It's the combination of those together that make a business transformation. So how do we apply this information? Well, for people, it's about getting closer to our customers, whether they're internal or external, to deeply understand their needs, to invest in culture and skills to operate in this new crazy normal, to figure out how do we manage the full portfolio of IT projects, to figure out how we can work off-site, and to foster as I mentioned from the start, organizational agility and organizational innovation. And these are the aspects of success. Moore's law doesn't seem to be slowing down, and the impact of emerging technology is going to continue to transform every industry, whether we work locally or whether we work remotely. And I love this particular picture. Those of us who have been working in the world of IT for years, we can kind of look back from our perch and go, "Wow, remember that? Remember when they introduced the 386 coprocessor chip? How long we've come a long way." But let's take a look at the same diagram and look at the future 10 years from now. And computation, the cloud, the capability is going to vastly outperform where we are now today. It's just truly extraordinary. So those who are prepared are going to be the ones that will survive. I will leave you with this final quote from someone who you'll recognize: "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most prepared to change as their environment changes." And that, of course, is Charles Darwin.
That was fantastic, Tom. I have to say that I'm coming away now wanting to build a Marshmallow tower. That is where my mind immediately goes to. So it's clear from these examples that you've given that data is driving the technology revolution. I think there's no question about that. Where does the inspiration come from for the transformation itself? Have you found in the organizations that you meet with or talk with, is it coming from the top? Is it coming from the bottom? What drives the transformation that they're attacking?
Wow. It's all over. So I've worked with a very large healthcare company making a virus, hopefully not making a virus, making a vaccine now. And their transformation initiative came from the very top. So their goal was their approach was to systematically look across the entire organization, across all 27 divisions, and explore how they could produce improved efficiencies. So, really top-down and market-driven approach. And I've worked with another organization that is very much bottom-up, one that makes running shoes, and so kind of a mix there. But there's a number of core pockets where they're using generative design and emerging tools to kind of show up. So there's top-down and bottom-up. I think what's in terms of a critical success factor, the critical success is getting people to connect together. So top-down without engagement doesn't work. Bottom-up without engagement doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So wherever you happen to be along the food chain, connecting with the needs of other people and getting them involved in part of the process is absolutely the key factor.
So the drive or the success criteria, or the greatest success criteria, you believe falls on the people or process or technology? Which of those three would you prioritize if you were helping a company go through this?
I wouldn't. I would say you need to do all three. It's like saying we're going to make a stool, and the stool has got 3 legs. Which is the most important leg?
Right.
I've been party to transformations that didn't work, and I was actually speaking with my wife earlier about when we were doing many years ago, a transformation of Canada's largest museum, and we had the tech and we had the business model, but we didn't engage people along the way, and there was a lot of, frankly, fear about the impact of these emerging technologies. And the pretty sizable initiative was kiboshed. So that's the reason why I showed those 3 overlapping circles. I think as IT professionals, we now need to become maestros of business. We need to look at business holistically and see where we can add value, and through the tools that we offer.
So Fantastic, and that makes sense, especially needing all three legs of that stool because everyone clearly needs to buy into it. The one of the things that stood out to me, you talked about the lean agile design thinking of the organization. What can a manager do to help drive that lean agile, that transformation thinking? For the people in the audience, for myself, I have a team and we're working on all kinds of things. How can you drive that type of transformational thinking within the teams that you're working on?
That's a great question. And again, it kind of has to do with clarifying there's sort of three levels, if you will. So one is to become clear of the values, what's important. The second is the principles. How do you realize the values? And the third is the process. How do you make that real, for example? So in the transformation from stage gate methods to an agile method, the values that the Agile Manifesto produced almost 20 years ago now said we value working code over documentation. We value customer feedback and engagement over following a plan or a long-term plan. And there's a couple other as well. So getting clear about what you value and rewarding your team and ensuring that those are the values that will fit within the organization. Of course, not every transformation can go through an agile, many can, is the key part. So figuring that out, then understanding what are the principles. So principles in agile, they include paired programming. They include 6-week sprints, or 2-week sprints, 6-week planning. Kind of the own stand-up discussion. So there's a whole series of principles, and then there is the processes, kind of how you work on a day-to-day basis. So having a clear set of that, that cascading set of priorities is something that is you need to get clear of as a manager. Is this right for you? Is this important for you? Can you build up the skills to manage this? Because you have to kind of let go of something. With every new process, you gain something, but you also lose something. And then engage your team in a method to get them involved. Pushing agile, it too doesn't work. Engaging people through questions and involvement, that's the path to getting it work.
So how does the cloud factor into that? So clearly this agile thinking, you're doing things more rapidly. It was interesting to me that children were able to build better because they were iterating more quickly, right? Which is a key principle that you have to do. How does the cloud help you in that journey of transformation? What is the intrinsic value that it's providing for the organization?
Wow. Well, that almost is like asking what is the value of technology. And what I mean by that is that there's so much tremendous value that can be created. So there's lots of ways of thinking about the cloud. At a tactical level, of course, there's the backup, right? Another is having data available offsite. I actually got a couple of clouds myself. Just you never know when something untoward happens in your studio, and as you climb up the data food chain to machine learning or to some of the more kind of elegant advanced stuff that I was talking about, each is empowered by the cloud. So I like to think of the cloud as an enabler. It's a multiplier, which typically is far less expensive than managing on-site. So, hosted cloud service, it's like, I'm never going to host it. We never did at the, Autodesk and Alias. It just makes sense because working with a specialist for whom their entire business, they live and breathe the cloud, is a key factor. I think 60%, I had printed out in some of my research here, is for offsite cloud services, and that's the part that's growing the most. And some of the key problems of speed and accessibility and security, those have largely, I think, to any reasonable doubt, have been taken care of. So, we're the cloud's in an amazing spot. Did I answer your question?
It does, and it's. I mean, you brought up backup. We clearly do backup at Veeam, and we've seen ourselves actually just since the beginning of the pandemic, or I should say since the beginning of the year. Well over 100 petabytes of data going up into the cloud. It's going faster than ever before, and that gives the exciting thing about that is you can take all that data, of course, that you're sending there and use it for additional purposes like designing shoes to run more optimally, or the different examples that you gave. And I think that is clearly both an enabler. So it's not just protecting data, it's leveraging the data for these additional uses that you've been talking about.
Right.
As organizations move their data or begin to adopt cloud, how do they have to think differently about security and compliance? Is that something that you deal with on a transformation basis as they move the data into the cloud, or they begin to use computing power within the cloud?
I'm not a specialist in security. I wish I knew more about it, but it's a critical success factor in my days at Autodesk, when we were introducing cloud services to putting a movie on the cloud, putting a car design. I mean, those are billion-dollar assets, or in some cases, a $5 billion asset. And so those companies are really pretty reluctant to put that on. And so there's a whole set of, again, cascading capabilities to make sure that that data is safe, it's robust, it can be returned quickly. And I would actually defer the question to you, because I think that's one of the many specialties that you would have. But something I wanted to just build on a previous point. The fact that you don't have to manage the cloud management in small business frees up the IT organizations to do new things. On your website is that Canadian Ducks Unlimited, and they have, I think, 240 employees, also using sensors technology, creating accurate maps of the world. They were of ecosystems and wetlands in particular in Canada, and one of their they needed to back up the data from the 240 laptops out into the field, nonprofit, right? And so the cost of that was well over $100,000. A single IT professional. A lot of time was and with services such as yours, that cost went away, right? And that service went away, and so they could take that capability, the headcount, and go from sort of a protective to tactical reactive to a strategic. What can we do with the data? And so, taking care of your business, cleaning out your basement, as my wife would like to say, is just a powerful benefit of this. So, up and down the food chain, we get value moving to the cloud.
Yeah, there's no question. I am always impressed within our customer base of those. You mentioned Ducks Unlimited. They save the data for 60 years. Because they don't know that the data that they're collecting today, is it actually going to help address climate change? Or we have power companies like Royal Dutch Shell that is moving from typical oil and gas petrochemical field to leveraging more sustainable energy. And healthcare, sequencing the genomes, are coming up with vaccines for COVID-19. These are things that obviously technology is driving. And one of the things that the cloud clearly provides is the power, the elastic power of the cloud to help apply machine learning techniques, artificial intelligence techniques to solving some of these big issues. So if you're going through kind of that journey of 1,000 miles, there's always a first step in it. What is the first step for organizations? So they're trying to do this technology change. What is the first step from where they are today to going towards the cloud or solving the technology transformation?
It's beginning with questions. And it's a collaborative discussion of asking the basic question. And the basic question begins with why? Why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? What's the purpose? Who's involved? And so on. And we've actually built out a toolkit of these sets of questions and these sets that you ask in order, and you quite literally visualize. my studio elsewhere, you'll see these giant boards of, and that's really critical. That's the part that focuses thinking. So what I would first suggest is begin with the set of questions that are tactical, intermediate, and strategic. So the strategic questions, of course, are why are we doing this? What is the value that we're trying to achieve? How does technology serve our mission? How are we trying to differentiate ourselves, and so on. So there's classic business questions, and to literally make them physically explicit. Again, whether you happen to be working together or on a shared collaboration board, there's all kinds of great tools that are now available. I think that is the first step. Why is that important? Because it begins to prioritize and to establish different types of goals. By the way, one of the exercises in design thinking is something called a question blitz. And again, it seems kind of ridiculous when you hear about it, but when you actually do it, it's enormously powerful. And that is begin with a number of people in a room or working virtually with their digital sticky notes, and have the topic at hand. So the topic may be, we're engaged in a digital transformation. So and then people are asked to post questions, 5 questions each, maybe 10 questions each, and then you sort them. And what happens there is magic, because people begin to see the transformation, the topic, from a number of different perspectives. Tactical, people involved, the rollout, the budget, of course, the variety of technologies. And what it also does is it gives you sort of more elbow room, because you're not looking at solutions first, but you're thinking about what queries to ask. And we found that simple act elevates the intelligence of the group, because they are forced to think in many points of view and to look at the issue much more systematically. That's the first step. Ask questions, and then second step is to begin with an iterative plan. A colleague of mine says, think big, but act small. So begin with a vision and then take the steps to move forward.
Yeah, I like that. We internally here, we talk about innovate and iterate, but I like that design thinking ahead essentially of those problems that you're trying to solve. And also you touched on budget, which I think is a good point, because sometimes you have to justify these things to the executives, and being able to show the return on investment both in short term and long term is obviously interesting. Now, I know we only have a few minutes left here, but if I can ask you kind of one thing that you would leave the audience with, your recommendation to move forward on technology transformation, what would your one recommendation to the people in the audience be to drive this type of transformation?
I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say, create a one-pager. And on the one-pager, have 7 elements. Number 1, what's changing? So the context. So give a reason for what's changing. Number 2, the vision. So connect to the aspirations of the business leaders. Number 3, the goals. In other words, the impact of the work that's going to take place. Number 4, what's in it for you? What's the benefit of investing in this technology? Number 5, what's required from you? What's the ask? And also, what's the engagement that people will have? Number 6, what are the immediate next steps? What do you want them to make a decision on right now so you can start your work tomorrow? And number 7, draw a picture of success. So with the implementation, with the improved business function, improved services, put it all together. That's a simple one-pager, but it's hard to do, and it begins with questions. So number 1, context. Number 2, vision. Number 3, goals. Number 4, what's in it for you, the benefits. Number 5, what's required from you. Number 6, next steps. And number 7, a picture of success.
Oh, I love that, because it brings everyone in alignment, and clearly the data is driving this transformation. So I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to hand it back to David to wrap things up. David?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Tom and Danny. Really cool stuff. Just incredible presentation. One of the best presentations we've had in doing hundreds and hundreds of events. So thank you so much, Tom, for that. We do appreciate it. Before we go, I want to announce the winner of our 3 Oculus Rift VR headsets. Those are going out to Corey Lowe from Ohio, Andy Wynn from Kansas, and Douglas Woodington from Michigan. Congratulations, of course, to all the prize winners. Thank you to our expert presenters, really great presentations. And of course, thank you to everyone out there in our audience. For more information on the Veeam Cloud Data Protection Solution, visit veeam.com. Again, thank you to Danny and thank you to Tom. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.